Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's kick things off with a look at the day's headlines. South Korea's presidential office says Seoul's top security advisor travelled to San Francisco over the weekend to hold talks with his US and Japanese counterparts on the upcoming summits with North Korea. Vladimir Putin sails to victory in Russia's presidential election, locking up almost two-thirds of the vote. He'll remain the country's leader for the next 6 years. Plus, South Korean skaters light up the 2018 short-track speed skating World Championships in Montreal, scooping multiple golds a matter of weeks after their success at the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. It's been revealed that the top security advisors of South Korea, the US and Japan met over the weekend in San Francisco to discuss the upcoming talks with North Korea. For more on this, we have on the line our Kwon Jang-ho, who joins us from Seoul's Unification Ministry. Jang-ho.
Good morning, Mark. A Blue House spokesperson informed reporters just a couple of hours ago that Chae-yong, Seoul's national security advisor, had flown to San Francisco on Saturday and held a closed-door meeting with his US and Japanese counterparts, HR McMaster and Shotaro Yachi. They were said to have discussed the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and also coordinate efforts in preparing for the landmark Inter-Korean Summit in April and the US-North Korea Summit in May. The spokesperson said that the three advisors also agreed to, quote, not repeat their past failures. This is the latest in a number of trips that has been taken by Chung and South Korean officials to gear up for these talks. It's already the second time Chung has visited the US since he acted as a special envoy and met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang earlier this month. He's also had trips to China and Russia to brief them on the situation. Another special envoy visited Japan on a similar agenda, and earlier last week, Seoul's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa met with her US and Japanese counterparts in Washington. It can be seen as a result of the surprising and sudden way US President Trump accepted Kim Jong-un's invitation to meet, with so much to prepare, and for such an unprecedented event in such a short space of time, we can expect more of such meetings in the coming weeks. Back to you, Mark.
Well, thank you very much for that report, Jang-ho. That was Kwon Jang-ho on those talks, security talks ahead of the big summits to come in the next several weeks. Now, South Korea's top diplomat says North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has given his word to denuclearize ahead of the back-to-back inter-Korean and US-North Korea summits. Speaking to CBS on Sunday, Kang Kyung-hwa said the significance of his word is weighty in the sense that this is the first time that the words came directly from the North Korean supreme leader himself, adding it's something that has never been done before. Kang said the issue of denuclearization is a concern not just for the US, but for South Korea as well. The two Koreas will meet on Tuesday to discuss the details of a performance by a South Korean performing squad in Pyongyang. The South Korean delegation will be headed by a popular singer and composer who has been tapped for his experience of arranging pop music concerts. Kim Hyo-sun with the details.
Yoon Sang has been named as South Korea's music director for the performance team to visit North Korea. Seoul's Unification Ministry added that the two Koreas will sit down on Tuesday to discuss the details of the performance to be held in Pyongyang. While Yoon is the first pop culture figure to lead a South Korean delegation to meet with North Korean counterparts, the ministry explained he's most suitable candidate to prepare for a performance that will mainly feature South Korean pop music. Yoon, along with officials from Cheongwade and the Unification Ministry, will meet with the North's delegation headed by Samjiyon Orchestra Director Hyun Song-wol at the Tongil-gak, a North Korean pavilion at the border village of Panmunjom. The North invited Seoul's performance team and a taekwondo demonstration team to its capital city when South Korean presidential envoys visited Pyongyang earlier this month. Both performances will likely be held in early April, ahead of the landmark Inter-Korean Summit scheduled for later that month. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea's Deputy Director General for North American Affairs at the Foreign Ministry, Choi Kang-il, is in Helsinki for a so-called Track 1.5 meeting with South Korea and the U.S. The talks bring together a mixture of current government officials and non-governmental experts. Though no details have been released as to who is taking part in the meeting and where the meeting will actually take place, sources in Seoul say Choi will meet with former U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Kathleen Stevens and security experts from Seoul. Finland's foreign ministry also said the meeting will be academic and from the perspective of international relations. And another round of talks with officials from Pyongyang wrapped up over the weekend in Sweden. The top diplomats of North Korea and Sweden discussed diplomatic efforts to peacefully resolve the security situation on the Korean peninsula. Jong-un reports.
The foreign ministers' meeting between Sweden and North Korea ended on Saturday with the focus mainly on the security situation on the Korean peninsula. Sweden says its Foreign Minister Margot Wallström and North Korean Foreign Minister Lee Myung-bak discussed, quote, opportunities and challenges to diplomatic efforts to peacefully solve the North Korea issue. The talks also dealt with Sweden's consular responsibilities in North Korea, where it works on behalf of countries including the U.S. Though not explicitly stated, the announcement hints that the Washington-Pyongyang summit talks may have been on the table, as well as the release of Americans detained in North Korea. Stockholm added that the two ministers touched upon regional security cooperation among South Korea, Japan, Russia, China, and the U.S., which implies that they may have also talked about the resumption of the six-party talks. But the ministry did not reveal specifically what the two ministers agreed on, raising the possibility that Sweden and North Korea were not able to come together on much or anything. Pyongyang has not made any announcement about the talks with Sweden as of yet. 오정희, 아리랑 뉴스.
The government is set to submit its bill on constitutional revision on March 26th, while President Moon Jae-in is away on his trip to Vietnam and the UAE this week. The Presidential Office of Cheong-wha-dae said moments ago that the bill is expected to be submitted to the National Assembly on that day to secure the 60-day deliberation period for Parliament. The draft will be available for the public for their review starting this week and is widely expected to include scrapping the current single 5-year presidential term limit and replacing it with a renewable 4-year term similar to the US system. The draft was presented by a presidential advisory committee last week. The government hopes to hold a referendum on a constitutional revision at the same time as local elections in June. The Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office is ready to determine whether or not to request an arrest warrant for ex-President Lee Myung-bak as early as today over charges of bribery, embezzlement and tax evasion. The former president faces allegations he controls a slush fund worth some $11 million hidden behind auto parts maker Das. It's highly likely prosecutors will request a warrant for his arrest amid concerns he could try to destroy evidence. Lee's wife, Kim Yoon-ok, is also at risk of being summoned very soon over suspicions that she was involved in alleged bribery and corruption when her husband was in office. The PyeongChang 2018 Winter Games are now officially over after the Paralympics came to an end on Sunday with a closing ceremony. Cha Sang-mi was there and filed this report.
Following up on the success of the PyeongChang Olympics, the 2018 Winter Paralympics capped off 10 days of competition on Sunday night with a memorable final ceremony. The closing ceremony was held under the theme We Move the World, which represents the expansion of this enthusiasm from Korea to the world. Spectators began streaming into the Olympic Plaza hours ahead of the closing ceremony. The atmosphere was exciting, but also bittersweet, as it was the end of a global celebration.
It's been 2 months since I came to PyeongChang for this position in the transportation department. I'm so glad the games came to an end successfully, but it's also kind of a pity that it's all over now.
Oh, it was very exciting and very inspiring just to see the athletes really going out there and giving it their all and actually just fighting through all of their personal struggles and taking home some medals.
Along with the official event, 3 cultural performances took place with K-pop stars, including Korean-American singer-songwriter Lee and other musicians, some of whom have disabilities, such as 𝘠𝘠, a ballerina who has a hearing impairment. Apart from the glamour of the performances, the president of the International Paralympic Committee, Andrew Parsons, in his speech, paid tribute to the late British scientist Stephen Hawking, who died on Wednesday. He noted that Hawking served as a role model for many people with disabilities worldwide. South Korean President Moon Jae-in and First Lady Kim Jong-suk, who have been cheering along with the crowd at many of the Paralympic Games, also joined the closing ceremony. The organizers were extra helpful on site, preparing many facilities and services to help spectators with disabilities, such as braille leaflets and on-screen sign language interpreters, as well as at least 300 handicapped accessible seats. The Olympic flame was extinguished, marking the official end of the PyeongChang Games, and looking ahead to the next Paralympics to take place in 2022 in Beijing. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News, PyeongChang.
So the curtain came down on the Paralympic Games with Sunday evening's closing ceremony, but the success of the Games will be remembered for a number of special reasons, from record ticket sales to South Korea's first ever gold medal. Lee Seung-jae takes a look back at the Games that exceeded everyone's expectations.
After a successful 2018 Winter Olympics a month earlier, the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Paralympics have gone down as the most successful Winter Paralympics in history in terms of ticket sales, with more than 343,000 tickets sold. It shatters the previous record of 316,000 tickets sold at the 2014 Sochi Winter Paralympics. But the competing delegations were a part of history as well, as a record number of delegations won a medal at this year's Winter Paralympics, with 26 nations out of 49 earning a spot on the podium. In addition, a record 20 nations won gold, 3 more than the previous record set in 1998 and 2002. The 2018 Winter Paralympics in PyeongChang also saw 3 nations make their debut, including North Korea, who was represented by Ma Yu-chul and Kim Jong-hyun in cross-country skiing, after granted last-minute entries by the International Paralympic Committee. Georgia and Tajikistan also made their Winter Paralympics debut as part of the 49 delegations competing for 10 days. For the host nation, South Korea's goal of winning the nation's first Winter Paralympics gold was achieved thanks to para-Nordic skier Shin Hee-hyun in the men's 7.5-kilometer sitting cross-country skiing event. Combined with Shin's bronze from an earlier event and South Korea's first medal, a bronze in the ice sledge hockey competition, South Korea won a total of 3 medals, its most ever in a single Winter Paralympics. With the Paralympic flag handed over to Beijing, the next host of the Winter Paralympics, the Paralympians' achievements in 2018 will immortalize into the history books. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea, among other things, spent nearly $110 million just on the construction of a stadium for the 2018 Winter Games. And now that the Games are over, the question becomes, how does the country prevent these massive investments becoming the usual post-Olympic white elephants? Our Won Jung-hwan reports.
The Olympics have been an economic boon for some host cities. Los Angeles is estimated to have made more than $200 million over the decades thanks to the Games, including the leftover facilities. But the ugly fact is that the most Olympic buildings leave a legacy of debt and maintenance costs for underused buildings known as white elephants. That's something PyeongChang wants to prevent. As there's been a range of opinions about what to do with the facilities in PyeongChang once the Games, the organizers have decided to go with more modest plans, perhaps to their credit. For example, after the closing of the Paralympics, workers will eventually tear down the $109 million PyeongChang Olympic Stadium. It'll have been used just 4 times, but the organizers decided that this is one way PyeongChang can avoid the white elephants.
I think it is a smart decision to demolish the main PyeongChang stadium, considering the location is too isolated to use later. But plans for other venues should be made carefully to keep them operational because the demolition cost will be very high.
In fact, the local government has planned a way to efficiently use 9 out of 12 sporting venues.
We have already signed contracts with private companies for the use of those venues, and we are also looking into some conditions for the use in the upcoming Asian Winter Games.
9 venues will be reused by other parties such as local governments and universities. But really, the most effective way to prevent the white elephant problem at the Olympic will be a complete overhaul of the way the competition is run.
It will be a good idea to promote winter sports so people use the venues after the games. For example, there aren't many bobsleigh or skeleton track in Asia, so if Cheongsong plans well, the venue could be used as a great facility for local and even international athletes.
Although PyeongChang, like previous host cities, suffered significant cost overruns, the organizers seem to have learned from the success and failures of their predecessors. Won Jong-un, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's short track speed skaters were in action over the weekend in Montreal for the 2018 Short Track Speed Skating World Championships. And they capped off another successful Worlds with 2 more golds in the men's and women's relay events, led by 19-year-old Choi Min-jung. The South Korean women's team won the 3,000-metre event, matching their performance at the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. In the men's relay event, the South Korean men's team grabbed gold in the 5,000 metres. Choi Min-jung won 4 gold medals at the Worlds, including the 500-metre, 1,500-metre and 3,000-metre super final. Now for a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we're going to start in Russia today. As widely expected, Vladimir Putin has won a 4th term as president, taking the helm of the Kremlin for another 6 years. For more on this and other international news, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So Adam, just run us through how the vote played out.
Well, Mark, early results and an exit poll from Sunday's election show Putin with nearly 75% of the vote, so there's no disputing the fact that he has won. A state exit poll put voter turnout at about 64%, which is just over a percentage point lower than that in the 2012 election. Putin was hoping for a large turnout and large margin so he could claim an indisputable mandate. Confident of the win, he gave a brief acceptance speech in Moscow, thanking his supporters.
Thank you very much for your support. Success waits us. It is very important to stay unified, my dear people. It is very important to win over even those who might have voted for different candidates. We need this unity to move forward, and in order to move forward, we must note the feelings of every citizen.
However, Sunday's election was not without its controversies. Prior to the poll, Putin's main rival, Alexei Navalny, was barred from the race due to a fraud conviction which he said was manufactured by the Kremlin. He had repeatedly urged voters to boycott the election, and on his YouTube channel after the poll, Navalny called Putin a liar for claiming Russia was a democratic country with fair courts. As for the poll itself, there have been widespread reports of ballot box stuffing and forced voting. Russia's Central Election Commission recognized that there were some irregularities, but said there were no major violations and will likely declare the vote as legitimate. Even with the hiccups, however, Putin's popularity in his country is undeniable. It remains high despite his suppression of dissent and reproach from Western nations over Syria, Ukraine, allegations of Russian election meddling, and more recently, the poisoning of a former Russian spy in Britain. Amid renewed attention to a cronyism scandal surrounding Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, his cabinet's approval rating has taken another hit. A Kyodo News poll released on Sunday shows support dropping to 38.7%, down 9.4 percentage points from a previous poll conducted about 2 weeks ago. The latest survey was conducted over the weekend, about a week after the Finance Ministry admitted to removing references of Abe and his wife from documents linked to the scandal. More than 66% of respondents said Abe should be held accountable for the ministry's action. However, 47.6% said Abe does not need to resign, while 43.8% said he should. Turkish-backed forces have taken over the Syrian city of Afrin after Kurdish forces were forced to leave the area. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said his special forces and the Free Syrian Army seized control of the city centre on Sunday morning local time. Turkish fighters could be seen waving flags and taking down a statue of a legendary Kurdish figure. It is the result of a 2-month operation to clear the border region of the Kurdish YPG militia, despite calls from Europe and the United States urging Ankara to stop the offensive. Turkey sees the YPG as terrorists, but the US has trained and even armed some Kurdish troops to fight against the Islamic State group.
Good morning. Most regions are seeing some much-needed rain since last night. Most of the showers have let up in the northwestern areas this morning, while southeastern regions including Busan will see rain all day today, and Jeju Island will be wet through tomorrow morning. And it's not going to be that warm, getting up to 11 degrees Celsius here in the capital and Daejeon. Daegu will be breezier than Seoul, topping out at 10 degrees this afternoon. And expect some colder than average temperatures in the first half of the week, so you need your thick jacket again for the next couple of days. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. Well, most regions in South Korea will have a rainy and cloudy start to the work week. North Korea will be under mostly sunny skies along with mild temperatures. And as for the rest of Asia, those of you in Tokyo will need to keep an umbrella handy this week. On and off rain is in the forecast until Friday. Meanwhile, bizarre March weather persists in Perth and expect to have a sweltering first half of the week under mostly sunny skies. And heading to North America, I hope those of you in Chicago enjoy the balmy weather on Sunday. Temperatures will drop a few notches with rain in the forecast at the end of the week. And as for South America, Bogota will be cloudy, while Rio de Janeiro will be scorching under sunny skies. And taking you to Europe, Rome will see frequent rainfall this week, while those in Madrid will see the sun returns on Sunday or Tuesday, rather. Lastly, to Africa, hot weather conditions continue in Cairo at a high of 32 degrees Celsius. And that's all the weather update for now.
Well, on that delicious-looking note, that's where we're going to leave the news for now. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time in around an hour and a half from now. So until then, goodbye.
Don't hold back. Conquer challenges. Draw a brighter world. The next Korea Generation Y.
안녕하세요. 저는 위드고의 고상우라고 합니다. 저희 회사 위드고는 착한 음료를 통해서 청춘의 삶을 응원하는 회사입니다.
A slice of bread was a meal for Sang-woo during his college years when he didn't have enough money. He believes that many young people go through the same experience.
이윤적인 부분만 생각을 한다면 정말 남는 게 별로 없습니다. 근데 저희는 좋은 세상을 만들어야 하는데 의무가 있다고 생각이 들어요. 위드고의 구성원은 같은 학교, 같은 과로 첫 만남을 지었던 친구들이에요. 제가 가장 사랑하는 부모님을 기반으로 저희가 탄생을 했고요. 정말 사랑하는 사람과 많은 시간을 보내고 회사에서 같이 일을 한다면 가장 좋은 것이겠다라고 생각을 했기 때문에 제조업이라든지 공장에서 일한다는 인식 자체가 동생들 같은 경우에는 제가 좀 미안한 부분이 있어요.
Others might have prejudice against working in a factory, but Sang-woo tells his co-workers that if they believe they're doing something valuable, they don't need to pay attention to what others think. Sang-woo believes that by living an honest life himself, he can change those around him.
단순히 그냥 우리가 할 수 있는 일을 하자. 청춘들이 정말 다들 힘든데 우리가 그 사람들에게 세상은 이렇지 않다라는 거를 말할 수 있는 부분이 뭐가 있을까? 흡사대용 음료를 하나 그냥 준다고 해서 그 사람 삶에 많은 영향을 미칠 수는 없겠지만 저희가 나눠줄 때 그런 표정이라든지 말이 진심이 전해지면 그 청춘들도 마음이 아주 따뜻해지고 세상을 바라보는 시각 자체가 달라지지 않을까.
전에도 한번 나와서 받아본 적이 있거든요. 근데 그때도 문구 같은 걸 써서 주셨더라고요. 그게 자극이 되고 힘을 받는 건 느꼈어요. 그리고 맛있더라고요. 그래서 되게 감사했어요, 그때도. 지금도 잘 먹겠습니다.
Sang-woo knows they can't change the social structure immediately, but he believes if they take one step at a time, they will eventually make a better world for future generations.
나는 작은 한 병에 큰 행복을 담는 대한민국 20대다.
The next Korea Generation Y.
If you're a foreigner planning to live in Korea, he is a must-know. His name is Paul Carver, and he's the head of the Seoul Global Center that specializes in helping foreigners ease into their new life in Korea. So, what practical advice can he give to make your life in Korea more enjoyable?
다들 영국에 대해서 혹시 좀 아는 거 있나요? 영국 어떤 나라인지, 이해인지?
선생님이 사랑한다.
정답.
On Heart to Heart, we hear about the organization's various projects currently in the pipeline and Paul's life story on how he ended up in this country. Our guest today goes all out to help expatriates in Korea. Joining us today on Heart to Heart is head of the Seoul Global Center, Paul Carver. Hello, and thank you for joining us on Heart to Heart. Would you like to say hello to our viewers that are watching?
Firstly, thank you for having me. It's always great to have an opportunity to talk about what I do. My name is Paul Carver. I'm originally from the UK, but I've been living in Korea for the last 10 years now, 13 years total. And my job is basically to help foreigners with any problems they have with their life in Seoul. So I'm here to talk about it.
Okay, well, wonderful. It's great to have you. Thank you once again for joining us. So first of all, let's begin by talking about the Seoul Global Center. So could you give us a brief introduction of the center and also tell us about the work you do in more detail?
Okay, so as you're probably aware, the World Cup was held in Korea in 2002, and there was expecting to have a big influx of foreign fans coming to Korea, and they thought they might need to put some kind of help desk or service to help people get around Seoul, etc. So there was, at that time, they set up Seoul Metropolitan Government set up a small sort of help desk, and it's basically mushroomed from there. In 2008, we set up the whole Seoul Global Center as it is now, and since then it's been growing bigger and bigger. In total in Seoul, there's about 43 different facilities who are helping foreigners, and I head up the Seoul Global Center plus 10 others, including global village centers, which are located in foreign-heavy areas like 𝘚𝘰𝘶 or Icheon, the Japanese area. And then we've got business center and 2 other smaller global centers. So.
The first step is always the hardest. But no matter where you go, no matter where you live, no matter where you work, no matter what you do, there is someone there to guide you. A one-stop service to help foreign residents in Seoul lead a hassle-free life. Multilingual counseling, business startup support, education programs, daily life help desks, cultural experience programs. Now, I'm sure that you've spoken with hundreds and hundreds of people, especially non-Koreans, through the Seoul Global Center. And I'm curious, what do non-Koreans in general find most difficult while trying to adapt to their new lives in Korea?
I think generally overall it's language problems. So people come here first of all, either they don't speak any Korean or they speak sort of basic Korean. And although they can get by without that, if they want to sort of really settle in and enjoy life here, they need to learn a certain degree of Korean.
Right.
So one of our main programs is obviously Korean classes to help them learn the language they need to fit in or to adjust to their daily life. Beyond that, I think a lot of people are very unhappy about, shall we say, corporate culture in Korea. So long hours, lots of overtime, short holidays, things like that.
Yes.
So
I would have to agree.
So those kind of things are basic problems. But I mean, over the time I've been living here, I think life's certainly improved a lot. And people who are coming, when I look on Facebook and see what people are complaining about nowadays, to me it's like, you should have been here 10 years ago. It was not so much worse. And,
I see.
and now you don't know how easy you've got it, turning into an old grumpy man.
Yeah, I mean, you gave us an example of the 2002 World Cup. I mean, back then it was like a small help desk, for example. But now, I mean, the 2018 Winter Olympics is over, but we've been hearing great things about how helpful the volunteers were and how there were so many people actually there to help out with, you know, people that were having difficulty speaking English or communicating. So, yeah, that's a great improvement, I would have to say.
If you think from the '88 Seoul Olympics to the 2002 World Cup, and then from the World Cup to now, there's just so much change from people that I've heard about from people who've been here that time.
I mean, I'm sure that you've seen a lot of positive changes as well over the years. So what do non-Koreans residing in Korea find most convenient?
I think the first thing that everyone notices is the public transportation. The buses, frequent. The buses and subways run from very early in the morning to very late at night, clean and etc. So that's the first thing that everyone notices. From my point of view, over the course of time, I've seen that we've seen Korea opening up. They've signed a bunch of FTAs with various different countries, so USA, Chile, Europe, and based on that we've seen an influx of foreign foods and other foreign products, which has made, like back in the day, if you wanted to find cheese, it was virtually impossible, right? But nowadays you can go into pretty much any supermarket and they'll have 5 or 6 different kinds of cheese that you can buy. So obviously, as I said, influx of foreign products, alcohol. We've seen big foreign chains like IKEA coming in, so you can get furniture and things like that. So that's one of the biggest improvements.
When do you feel most fulfilled while working as head of the center?
When I see someone who comes in a complete state because they're in a really difficult position, and then through our help, they're able to get out of their situation and go out the other side smiling. And I can, like last year, there was a couple of cases. I've got time to. So there was one guy. His parents had met in Korea like maybe 30 odd years ago, and they'd got married and gone back to the States and had him. And I don't want to go into too much personal detail, but his mum had got sick, so she'd come back to Korea to recuperate.
Yes.
And somehow over that time they'd lost contact, so he hadn't seen his mum for 25 years or so. And he contacted us and said, "Oh, I'm looking for my mum." And luckily, through a bit of work, we were able to find his mum and reunite them. So actually we do get quite a few requests of that nature from overseas adoptees, and it's really difficult to make progress, but this one case we were successful. So beyond that, there was a foreign student last year. He kind of made the news because he'd been disappeared for 3 days, and what happened was he'd been out drinking, and he was looking for a bathroom, so he opened a door, and it wasn't a proper door into a place, it was like a door into a cellar. So he'd opened it and fallen into this kind of ventilation shaft.
Oh my goodness.
And got stuck in there. And the only reason he was found is because the hotel was supposed to, every 6 months they have to get these ventilation shafts checked out for some reason. So the cleaning crew came along to check the ventilation shaft, and they found him very weak, very dehydrated.
Oh my goodness.
He was very lucky because actually the crew was supposed to come the week before, but for some reason they delayed it a week. So, but then he came into the centre like trying to solve, because he had to, they called the fire brigade out to the hotel and they had to cut some things open to get him out. So he had to deal with that, about how to recompense the hotel for the damage that they'd suffered.
Oh, I see.
On a day-to-day, there's so many different cases and so many different problems that...
홀카버 센터장님은 항상 자기 일에 열정적이시고 외국인 주민들의 그런 어려움과 마주치는 고민들을 항상 해결하려고 하시는 분이세요.
우리 센터장님도 외국인 분이시는 게 좋고, 한국에서 살면서 외국인들의 입장을 누구보다도 잘 이해하시는 우리 센터장님이랑 일하기 너무 편하고 소통도 잘 됩니다.
And whenever a new foreigner comes to Korea, Paul's always the first one to kind of help them settle in. He always meets them at the GS, he always kind of takes them to the football and shows them around. And he's a very, very passionate FC Seoul fan.
There are 5 things that you need to know about Paul. Number 1, it was Paul who introduced me to my lovely wife. Number 2, Paul is from Yorkshire, God's own county. Number 4, Paul came to Korea because he heard they had the best plastic surgeons in the world and he wanted to look like Nicolas Cage.
Your affinity for Korea grew while traveling back and forth between the UK and Korea. So I'm curious, what kept you, coming back? What made you return to Korea? What made you come back?
Okay, so I guess to go right back to the beginning, when I was 16, my dad said we're going to go on this tour of Asia, and we set up aside about a week or 10 days to visit his friend who was working at the embassy in Seoul.
I see.
So during that trip, I went to Singapore and Bangkok and Malaysia and Korea, but it's only really Korea that kind of stuck in my mind. So I had the opportunity after my year in China to come over here in the summer, which was in '96, and did this kind of cultural experience program. So I was doing doing taekwondo. Get up every morning at 6 o'clock, go and run around the campus and do taekwondo for an hour, go home for breakfast and then come back and study. And we got taken on 2 trips around Korea. So one going down the west coast and then up, and then one through Gyeongju, Busan, and up to the east coast.
Oh, wow.
So I got a really in-depth look at Korea at that time. And I went back and finished my university degree in Chinese. And when I was preparing to graduate, on our careers notice board one day, I saw this big poster saying, come to Korea and study for a master's degree. So I applied for this scholarship, which was given by the British Korean War Veterans Association, and along with Samsung Electronics. I applied, got it, came out here to do my master's.
I see.
2 years here for my master's, stuck around 6 months for the World Cup. And I got married at that time. But at that time, a man marrying a Korean woman didn't have the right to work. So it wasn't easy to find a job. So I went back to the UK, joined an accounting firm, worked for about 5 years there, and then had the opportunity to get posted back out to Korea with that company. Came back, worked 8 years, decided that I wanted a new challenge, so joined Seoul City government.
So that answers my question about what kept you coming back to Korea, and also, you know, what made you stay in Korea. So I guess those are all of your reasons. So here you are, having lived in Korea for over 10 years. Now you mentioned something about football. Right? So I'm going to move on to talk about football, because I know that you mentioned somewhere that you would go anywhere to watch an FC Seoul football match. And I understand that as a little boy, when you were like 3 or 4 years old, you would go to watch football with your father and your grandfather. They would take you everywhere, and you've always kind of had this special passion for football. Now, here's also an interesting fact. You and David Beckham are cousins.
Right, second cousins.
Second cousins. Yeah. Wow. How does it feel to be cousins with, or second cousins with David Beckham?
Okay, so David Beckham's grandmother is my grandfather's sister. So, but unfortunately his grandparents got divorced at a quite young age, so I've never actually met him. It's just this kind of blood relationship that exists, but no kind of real relationship.
Oh, but you do have something in common.
Football.
Love for football.
Love
yes.
for football, yeah.
Football.
So as I said, I've never met him. Since it's quite well known in Korea that I'm related to him, every time he comes to Korea, I wonder if someone's going to like ask him about me or try and set us up to meet. So, David, if you're watching, next time you come to Korea, I'll happily play a game of football with you.
Here he is. He'll be waiting for you.
Yeah. But in terms of football, my parents actually met at a football match.
Oh, they did?
So if it wasn't for football, I wouldn't be here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then my dad obviously took me along to football games when I was a baby. So I've grown up being used to watching live football in the stadium.
Right.
And when I had my son, obviously I wanted to sort of get him along to watch football matches as well.